Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
Hello and welcome once again to GammaCast. I'm your host, Charlie Esser, and with me once again is...
Phil Parrish.
And our very special guest host...
Dave White.
Thank you, David. Yes, got it right this time. Okay.
I had to remember who I was.
It only took us a week.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Welcome to GammaCast Mystery Man Part 2. That's Episode 16, Season 2, first air date, March 9th, 1979, 1 week after the last episode.
Itching our way closer to the 1980s.
Yes, inching. We're going to get there. In this episode, John Doe, that's David Banner to you and me, folks, and McGee Bond will keeping ahead of the forest fire and a pack of wolves. After transforming into the Hulk, Banner regains his memory, and when McGee witnesses a second transformation, he finally realizes the Hulk is not a green creature the full time. Bum, bum, bum. Spoilers. Yeah, I didn't realize they were going to give that whole episode away in that synopsis when I started reading it. Okay. So when last we left our intrepid heroes, they were on a mountain. The mountain had caught on fire, and a pack of wolves was chasing them. This episode, we're going to open up with the fire brigade gathering. The deputy marshal basically is given the lead marshal flack because he was on vacation when all this happens. Says you got to answer all those questions. They don't pay us deputies, fire chiefs to answer.
Yeah, honestly, that storyline was really the weakest part for me. I don't know about you guys or not, but the whole thing where he was like on vacation and then there was a situation where he had to go run to get his wife. I mean, it kind of took away from the pacing of the episode for me.
I think it was just, it just seemed like it was all set up for the end there in that Jeep scene at the end.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think absolutely it was. I think there's no doubt about that. That was a planned scene so that we could get our
So there'd be a reason why he would be there with his family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
If you look at it from that perspective, okay, it works.
Yeah. What it is a small writer's room and trying to piece all our pieces together. And what they wanted to have was a secondary bit of tension. Because, in truth, this is a two-part episode. Whether or not it needed 2 episodes is always debatable. Anytime you go into that two-part, and usually what I think happens when you go into a two-part episode is that you have basically, what amounts to an hour-and-a-half episode that you have to now make 2 hours. So they needed the secondary plot line, and then they had to tie it in to make it make sense to the overall story. Now, interestingly enough, I think that, in a more modern storytelling fashion, you would have the writer just say, no, it's just a completely separate story. We don't have to have a payoff that ties into our main story. We're just telling a secondary story. People weren't that bold back then. So we do have this secondary story. Now, our primary story here is that, David and Jack, or John and Jack, because we're still calling him John Doe, realize that there is this fire encroaching, and they're being followed by this pack of wolves, and they have to move no longer south or no longer north toward this town. They've got to go in the other direction, and without really a clear idea of where they're going to go. But they just know they have to stay ahead of the fire. They have to stay ahead of the wolves. And what I think we actually get to is something in this, which I think is the core of the David Banner character, which is that even though dragging Jack McGee is clearly a detriment to his survival, it is clearly something that's going to prevent him from getting to the end of this jury. He never once, even when Jack McGee starts to suggest it, say, just leave me, let me die out here, you go on, you go save yourself, David refuses to allow that because David or John cannot leave that man behind, cannot not be a hero. And I think that's a nice piece here. Just because, I'll say we, but let's say it's me. I'm often the guy who's picking up, why is David always taking his nose in everybody else's business? Why can't he just let well enough alone? Why must he answer injustice everywhere he goes? And I think in this, we get this kind of, in this very small bit, where we have these characters who we do know and do care about, even though the characters in their interactions don't have a reason to. We want David to not abandon Jack McGee in the woods to be eaten by wolves. We want that expressly because we want David to be the hero. And even though arguably, as Jack McGee calls him out, saying he's a soft touch, it's what makes David Banner a hero, what makes the Hulk a hero in this. In the last episode, Like a Brother, we had mentioned about how that's the first time the Hulk is really a superhero, where he is fighting a villain, an actual villain, a criminal, in the character of Taylor George. And in this one, again, we return to that idea of the inherent heroism of David Banner, and by contrast, the Hulk. And when we get to our first Hulk out, we expressly get that heroism of the Hulk. Now, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, our first Hulk out occurs when Jack McGee is falling off the cliff, correct?
Yeah, don't they tumble down the cliff or hill when isn't David holding on to him and then he hulks?
Yeah.
And then Jack gets himself knocked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the pain knocks him out, yeah.
And this is what I was mentioning last episode. They're being chased by wolves. Jack McGee is hanging by a branch. And that is so much a visual recreation of the
strawberry
parable. Yes, the strawberry. There's actually a Zen word for that, but I can't remember what the word is. But to use the Christian word, the parable, and he's hanging by the branch. Below him is the wolves. Above him, or below him is death. Above him, below him is the fire. Above him is the wolves. And there is David, the actual, thing he's been chasing his whole life, and he doesn't even know. I just thought it was just such a moment. And also, in that moment, that idea that, again, even though David has every reason to not try to save Jack in this moment, he does. And of course, we get our Hulk. And this is what's important. When he hulks out, when we get our Hulk, not only does the Hulk pick up Jack, he then grabs the sled. And he does the whole Super Hulk run, like, 5 times faster than they could normally get ahead of stuff. And I really thought that was a great scene to show how situationally aware the Hulk is. I think that's something we've been building more and more to in this, is the fact that, the Hulk is not a raging monster. The Hulk is not a dumb beast. The Hulk knows what David is in the middle of and has the basic knowledge to continue on in whatever it was David was doing.
So do you think he's aware, or do you I always think sometimes like it's almost like a hypnotic suggestion, like the last thing that was on David's mind is the first thing that was on the Hulk's mind. So the last thing David thought of before he changed was save Jack and get away from the wolves. So that was the first thing on the Hulk's mind.
Yeah, but what I would say is that he grabs the sled too.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the Hulk thinking he is the Hulk and forever the Hulk, and is just going to throw Jack over his shoulder and run.
Mm-hmm.
He grabs the sled because he knows they need that. That has their supplies. You really get in this scene a real depiction of the Hulk as a thinking, intelligent beast.
Mm-hmm.
And I do say I do like to see whenever they let Lou Ferrigno actually do some acting. And although I don't know if he really does much acting here, I think he gets some solid scenes to perform. Some solid scenes to show that Hulk is not just a big dumb beast. Mm-hmm. He is in this moment, he is a part of this moment, and he can bring our story forward.
Yeah, if ever there was a moment, and I'm going off track from what you were saying, because I agree with what you're saying about Lou Ferrigno. We've said it before where he's a great actor, but honestly, if they wanted to throw in a very superhero moment of the Hulk in any one of these episodes, you give a thunderclap and a Hulk leap, and the fire's out, and they're where they needed to be.
Yeah. Well, that of course, this is actually something, because when I watch this on MeTV, it goes the Hulk, and then it goes Batman. Well, it goes Superman from the 50s, Batman from the 60s, Hulk, and then Wonder Woman. And one of the things that always bugs me is how often they have Wonder Woman doing super leaps, and how rarely they have the Hulk doing super leaps.
Right.
And I do think that, for whatever reason, they opted not to use that as a special effect, either because there was nowhere to hide the wires on Lou Ferrigno, because he's not wearing a bustier, or what exactly the problem was. But yeah, we don't get enough super leaps in this. And yeah, it would be nice if he could do those massive Hulk moves, but I don't think we're going to see that in this. I don't think we're going to see anything like that until he fights Thor back in up in the mid '80s. When he fights Thor, we get some good Hulk moves.
Yeah, I guess they can't all be bears. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm never going to let that one go.
Well, it was right at the start.
Yes.
It's classic.
It is.
The real bear or the stuffed bear?
Yeah, well, we get the stuff. Well, no, because I don't know if you've seen the episode Haunted yet, David, but we actually get a return of the bear, or the return of a bear that David gets to fight in the Haunted episode, but that's a stuffed bear on rockers. So,
well, I thought when you guys were saying stuffed bear, I thought the one that he tossed, but I get what you're saying now. So.
That's what this one looked like last episode.
Yes. But so we've had this second Hulk out in this great moment, as I say, which to me is even if it's not intentionally a callback to the Strawberry Parable. And for what it's worth, this isn't the first Hulk out we've had like that. We saw the same thing in Escape from Los Santos, where again the Hulk has that person hanging over the edge. There is the danger coming from one end and the other, and that is when the Hulk makes an action. Perhaps even in if we want to get really esoteric on it, we can say that the Hulk and his superhumanity is the third way. That, in that moment he eats the strawberry because he knows death is imminent. But of course, in the superhero paradigm, death is not always imminent. There's always a third way. There always is a Hulk out. There's a Deus Ex Machina that will save the day. And the Hulk is that. The Hulk is, as you're hanging by that branch and you're reaching out for that strawberry, or even if there's no strawberry to reach out for, maybe the Hulk himself is that strawberry, that joy of life that gives us that chance for another, that inner strength that all humans have that pulls us through. That not to give up. Grab the strawberry and then climb yourself out, I think is the moral of that story. So David, after he hulks out, he gains back most of his memories, but not really all. Because he's still trying to understand the relationship between him and McGee. he now knows that he is the Hulk, and he now knows that McGee is after him, and he now knows that McGee is dangerous to him. But at the same time, he still doesn't understand everything. He still has to get McGee out of there. And at the end of the day, I think he still needs to come to understand a little deeper what's going on with the Hulk. So this is where we get some really good scenes. Again, just about the best McGee scenes. When he and David are talking, and it's like, why are you obsessed with the Hulk? Why do you need this? And it's an interesting point, because we've discussed Jack McGee's quality as a reporter in the past. Is he the world's best reporter? Is he the world's worst reporter? Is he just lucky, or do his actions have a plan? And we actually get a mention in this, or possibly the last episode, where we actually find out that, yes, Jack McGee does have a wall of weird. We had made the mention that if this had been a modern show, that, Jack McGee would have this wall of weird and all the sightings and all the press clippings. And he does say that. He's got all these pins in the map of, here's where Hulk was sighted, here's where we unconfirmed Hulk sighted, all these things. That he does have all these connections. And we also know, again, from the Hulk Breaks Vegas episode, that Jack McGee, for whatever it's worth, is a respected reporter among some reporters. And here's where we get this idea that Jack McGee was a reporter who was respected, who did real journalism. But for whatever reason, we don't know exactly what it was. Maybe just his leads dried up, or he rested on his laurels. But somewhere along the line, he lost that respect. And he winds up at the register, and he's churning away. And he sees the Hulk as his chance to be who he once was, to be that guy that the reporter we saw in Breaking Vegas really respected. And that's what he wants to get back to, and that's what he thinks the Hulk will get him to. I do think that is such a powerful moment for Jack McGee, especially when he's confronted by David about what about the Hulk. And we actually see this idea of regret within Jack McGee. That, no, I don't want to exploit the Hulk. He is, he's the seventh wonder of the world. He is something amazing that, should be honored and respected. And I don't want him exploited. But yes, I know very well that's exactly what the register is going to be. It's going to be King Kong. They're going to stage a Broadway show, with the Hulk in chains. And, it's this great moment for Jack Colvin and the character of Jack McGee. Both not only to acknowledge their own feat of play, their own, in a way, Jack McGee very much reminds me of J. Jonah Jameson. And J. Jonah Jameson often gets seen in this buffoonish light, in this bombastic light. But at the end of the day, what the character's core is as a newspaper man. And a man who has some real respect for what it is he does. Yes, he's compromised. Yes, he's chasing, the stories that'll sell. But he is a newspaper man, and that there is something noble about that. And that, to me, that's a real powerful thing. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I totally agree with you. I just think it was interesting this episode, just the dichotomy, just once Jack figured out that, Banner was, John was the Hulk, and, you could tell he really liked John, and he, even later on they show that, he wants to help John, but at the same time, he wants that Pulitzer, so he's gonna bring the Hulk in, no matter what. So it's kind of like he doesn't want, I'm sure he feels bad about, using his friend like that, but I think it's where he was saying, when he was talking about his father, and he was saying, my father never made anything of himself, Jack, that's where he gets his drive. Jack McGee's going to make something of himself. His name is going to mean something to future generations, even if he has to, sell his best friend up the river, I guess.
Yeah.
It's everything that you just said about Jack, spot on. It was great, and now as I'm thinking through it, I'm thinking with what David is now going to be carrying, for the rest of the series, is now this knowledge of what's driving Jack. And, it's like, does he somehow subconsciously going to be letting Jack get close enough but stay far enough away so that he can help him in some way, shape, or form? Because, we know David's a good guy too, and now he's going to be carrying around this backstory of why Jack is pursuing him so much, or pursuing the Hulk so much. And it's like, obviously he'd not want to run away so fast so that he doesn't get his opportunities to be great again. I don't see David be, the sabotage, knowing what he knows now, and so it's going to be an interesting ride to see what does David do with this knowledge that, Jack has laid on him about, why he's doing what he's doing and what his motivation is. It's a great storyline.
And can I say, this episode, these last two episodes were just, they show you what kind of character David Banner has, that he doesn't leave Jack McGee to die, because, any other person who maybe didn't have such a strong moral center would think about leaving Jack McGee behind, either get burned alive or ripped apart by wolves, and then, no one would actively be looking for him.
Yeah, especially with, the knowledge coming back to him as to who he was. And you could actually see that. You could actually, as the episode progressed, as John Doe or David Banner started figuring it out, you actually saw him getting a little more irritable towards Jack. And like, all right, now I've figured out who you are, and I don't like you now. But, yeah, it's just really, it's a really great evolution throughout the episode.
And just to make sure that everyone knows exactly what happened here, so in our second Hulk out, Jack McGee gets to witness David becoming the Hulk, and that is this revelation for him. But then again, because it's essentially what happens is David goes off on one end. Jack sees that the road, he finds the road. He says, we can find the road. If we can follow the road, we can get somewhere. And David comes back from, Jack falls down the hill, tree falls, it's on fire. David hulks out, Jack witnesses it. The Hulk picks up Jack, and then, because of course we had this plot line established earlier in this episode about the fire chief who has to go save his family from the cabin, they're coming down the road in the Jeep. The Hulk stops them and of course we get another great Lou Ferrigno scene here, a Hulk interacting with a child scene, where the child understands the Hulk is not a monster, understands the Hulk is not trying to cause problems, even as everyone else is afraid. The child understands, no, he wants us to help his friend. And then he gives them that, and then the Hulk runs off, and Jack McGee winds up in a hospital. And we see Jack McGee arguing with his editor, where he's trying to explain to him what is important about the story, this big revelation. And we get this idea that Jack's editors, Jack's publishers, don't care. They don't care about the story except in how it sells. That there's suddenly this gigantic revelation about the story. That the Hulk is essentially a skinwalker, that he can transform. He's a normal human being at once and a giant Hulk the next. And you can see the frustration that Jack has, that he wants them to understand the story, but they don't care. And, of course, that's the tragedy of Jack McGee. because he is in this spot. He has this story that he knows could take him further, but he has to get people to care. And now what will be interesting is to see how much this awareness that the Hulk transforms is going to inform his story. Whether or not he's going to start saying, hey, was there a little guy named David here just before the Hulk showed up in future episodes? We have to see if there is continuity to that extent or if that gets forgotten. But either way, it's going to be an interesting next couple episodes. As we've said, next episode, possibly the most 80s episode ever, because it includes Rick Springfield. Yes, that, Rick Springfield, in a special guest spot. Phil, why don't you give us your social media while we're on our way out?
Well, if anyone wants to talk any Marvel or DC comics with me, you can always email me, nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am @nightwingpdp. And if you like me and Charlie Esser together, check us and a few more of our friends out this fall on the all-new Legends of DC podcast.
Okay. And David, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, before I go into that, I just wanted to say I appreciate you guys letting me getting back on the show. And the payoff that we had at the end of this episode was definitely great to see, and him figuring out that, the transformation from a man into the Hulk, and then seeing the wonderful acting moment with Lou Ferrigno, which is always great to see. And I'm Dave, 80s Reboot on Twitter. Tumblr is 80sreboot.tumblr.com. Facebook is facebook.com/80sreboot. Email us at 80sreboot@gmail.com, and we also have a blog, which is southgatemediagroup.com/80srebootblog. And
David, you are always welcome to come back anytime. Always a pleasure to have you back. And of course, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I said thank you.
Yeah, and of course, as I do once again say, we are still looking for a co-host. Phil is the man who's like a brother to me, as we said 2 episodes ago, and still is. But he is a man who podcasts morning, noon, and night every day, and he may not have time for the Gamma Cast come the fall when other shows come on and that he has to podcast about. So if you want to get into the world of 80s rebooting and podcasting, reach out to Dave White, reach out to me, Charlie Esser at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And always tweet along with me and follow me and tweet at me and the tweets and twits that all the kids do nowadays. At Charlie Esser, that's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. I will live tweet the Incredible Hulk every Saturday when I can on MeTV at man, I gotta look it up. Is it 7 or 8 Eastern? I can't remember. I'm 7 Eastern. 7 Eastern because Wonder Woman's on at 8. Star Trek's on at 9, and then I think at 10 is when Svengoolie starts. Okay.
So Wonder Woman is after Hulk?
Yeah, Wonder Woman is after Hulk.
Sweet.
Yeah. It's actually a really great block.
I got to start watching MeTV now.
Yeah, it's the Super Sci-Fi Saturday block. Start off with George Reeves' Superman, goes to Adam West's Batman, followed by Ferrigno's Hulk, Carter's Wonder Woman, and then one James T. Tiberius Kirk before Svengoolie. Nice. With your Chicago area late night TV and the monster of the week. Okay, that is GammaCast for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Come and Hulk out with us again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.
Yeah, sorry about my voice, guys. I'm fighting the end of a summer cold here.
Yeah, I noticed that. It was sounding a little different there as you were talking.
Yeah. I kept on meaning to mention it and apologize on air. I just kept on forgetting.
No worries, man. You're all good.
Okay. Thanks, guys, and we'll figure out next stuff. And Phil, talk to you on Friday, 6:30.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Nice talking with you
Good night, guys.